So, okay, we're going to talk about some requirements, who can perform the test. That's a number one issue for a lot of the things that are out there. So, for those of you that are here, if something's not on this list, let me know what you want to make sure I help you address or make sure we answer as a question. So, we will tackle duct testing, envelope testing. I do have some air barrier slides that are phenomenal for those of you that are kind of newer to the blower door. If you give these to your builder, you have a high chance of passing. And we'll kind of go through the new 2015 requirements and why they're much more challenging. And the word on the street is that people don't care or they're not actually doing them. So I'd like to get some feedback on that also. So one of the reasons that I actually am working with Retrotec and do these trainings and that is because all of their gauges always did this. And when I came to Georgia, they were the first to really dig in and adopt the energy code and require testing. And their gauge actually gives you compliance results live in the gauge, especially air changes per hour. So as I'm doing a blower door, I can determine, hey, I'm actually passing my air changes per hour, or depends on where you live, you may be failing it. So those are great things. Once you set up your gauge and you turn it off and you go to the next job, whether it's a day later or a week later, you open it back up and it has the same setting. So if you normally do blower doors, then you don't have to change hardly anything except confirm your range. So once it's on, I always confirm a few things, that I have the Pascal or CFM, my results, that's on channel A and B on the right side. And then I make sure I got the right fan and the right range or plugs that are in there. So once I've got that, it's as simple as to run a test, I hit set pressure, 25 for a duct tester, 50 for a blower door. And it will actually automatically go to that test pressure and perform that test. I always recommend turning on the add feature just because you always want to make sure your results that you're writing down are at that test pressure. So that's as simple as it is. So I can now see my results at 25 pascals. And I also have other results that I can do, which we'll also have in other slides. I do want to promote the rCloud because this was designed as a code compliance concept. So rCloud is an app that you can download right now from the Windows Store for your tablets or your PC, or spell that out. It does not work on a Windows phone, but it does work on other devices. Or right now, it also works for Android devices, tablets or phones. So you can go to the Google Play Store and download the rCloud app. So basically, it's as simple as actually set up my equipment. I connect to the gauge. The gauge does need to be Wi-Fi. Almost all tablets and phones can connect to those. And I can run a test and share the report right there from the job site. Or when I get back to my office, I have a report ready to share. So one of the things that makes things great in our life is that we actually have this internet connection. So that does allow me to transfer information to and from the cloud storage in the app. But if you do not have internet, if you're in a remote area, it still works. You can still do the test and you can save it on the device. And when you have internet, you can upload it later. The one thing that it does do, which is amazing code requirement that I think will be more common soon in the future, is that it confirms where you were when you did the test. So these are great features that are going to be out there for your code compliance report, so that even if I don't have internet, I can still always have a GPS as long as I have that type of device that has a LTE setup. So if you don't have LTE or internet on your tablet, it's okay. You can still do it. It just doesn't document your GPS where you were. So I connect to my gauge, I hit start, it performs a test automatically, and it'll do the baseline and give me my results. It graphs everything, it shows exactly what's happening. And at the end, I get a report that will be phenomenal in terms of sharing with your code officials, or if you're a code official, these are the kind of things you're looking for to make sure it was done correctly. At the top, it tells you where you passed, it tells you where the test was done. And this is the kind of information that I think will be very valuable in making sure that code compliance moves to another level, not just that it was done, but we actually have validity on how it was done, where it was done. One of the questions that's common is this third-party concept that it says, well, you got to have a report and based upon the code official, whether or not they approve a third party. The definition of an approved third party is only defined by your jurisdiction and your building official. If you have the chance to be influential about how your code gets played out, I would encourage you to not insist on a super separated third party. And here's one of the reasons why is that all of the code changes are always about, does it cost more money for the builder? Does it cost more money for the builder? If it does, then it's not saving money or energy, even though those are two separate things. If you actually are going to make somebody who's not the HVAC installer test their work, it costs the HVAC installer more money. They've got to come back. They've got to come back a second time if it actually is failing, or all the other issues that go along with that. Georgia does not require a third party. This requires them to be certified. So that's a much better phrase that could be in here, that they should be an approved, certified person to do the test. So in general, if you have that chance to influence your code, this will only cause more headaches and more problems. Most of Georgia has not had an issue with having people test their own stuff. In fact, if the form you fill out, if you lie on it, it actually could be considered a felony, because those are actually state or federal kinds of documents. If you are looking for certification, BPI does offer the IDL. This is an awesome resource for people who want to actually learn how to do the code tests specifically. This is not diagnostic. This is just how to perform a code test and be certified and actually have a credential that you can give to your building official. This is approved, I'm going to estimate, maybe in 10, 12 states. Maybe there's only 20 states that are doing the blower door test, so they're on their way. If you are an approved BPI IDL person, let me know where you're at so we can confirm if your test is working for you. Oh, someone asked about the rCloud on an iPad. We're currently working on the Apple version. We're hoping that it will be out, let's say, in November. Whenever we say that, there's always a delay, but that's our goal, is to get that up to date. Retrotec does provide duct tester and blower door training when you purchase their equipment, so you can feel competent about going out and doing these tests. And they do have a test at the end that you must pass in order to get this credential. Let's dig into some duct testing. So duct testing is a requirement in all three of the codes. One of the things that has changed is that it's mandatory to do the test. But in later codes, 2015, it's mandatory to do the test, but the only time you're required to pass the 4 CFM per square foot, per 100 square feet, is if you're going to follow the prescriptive path. I'll try and say that again. That gets a little confusing. So if you're following the later codes, mandatory to do the duct test. But if you're going to do an ERI or an alternative compliance path, then you don't have to actually pass the 4 CFM per 100 square foot as part of your compliance. That information gets put in the rating software. So that's kind of the difference on whether or not you, IECC 2009, you actually had to pass this number to get through it. Otherwise, later codes adopted it as terms of mandatory to do the test, but not mandatory to pass an actual number unless you follow the prescriptive, 402.7, 405 point something as part of your path. So total leakage is one of the ways, a method that you can actually do in 2009, 12, and 15. Leakage outdoors was only in 2009, and it was eliminated in the subsequent tests. I do believe, and we'll find out in a week or so, whether it comes back with 2018. It is a requirement for third-party or above code programs, but 2012 or 15, it is not a requirement or a path in order for compliance. Okay, so here's some of the differences between 9 and 12 and 15. 12 and 15 are almost identical. So your rough end test, and I got a couple pictures about a rough end test, with or without an air handler. Some jurisdictions are removed without an air handler. For me, it's always one of the first things I see go in because they got to get it in the attic. But it may actually be different in your area if you have basements or somewhere else on the lower floors. So, and post-construction, again, this is 8 CFM and 12 CFM. These are very large numbers, which allow people to, in my opinion, accept the code. They were like, this is crazy. No, it's actually easy to pass. You can actually do a total leakage test without any mastic for the most part. As long as you've got good metal connections and fairly good seams, you can probably get away with a total leakage of 12 CFM. It doesn't take much to get there. So then they're like, okay, now that you're in the code, let's get you hooked on some tighter numbers. So for 2012 and 15, you're at 4 CFM per 100 square feet. And there is still an option if an air handler is not there that you can get down to 3 CFM. So this is no longer available in terms of leakage to outdoors, but 4 is kind of your mark to hit now. So it's 4 CFM per 100 square feet, whether it's rough in with the air handler or total leakage. So they did actually, I think, put it to a spot where you need to be on your game. There's still a lot of room for improvement. I know a lot of people that are down to 2 CFM or less. So it's really an easy number to hit for those who are, doing on top of their game and testing before they wait for final. So I think it's always important to do a rough in test to make sure you don't have any failures later. So this is not in the code, but it is a common interpretation to make sure we're all on the same page. And that is that if you have 2 air handlers, that it is the area that is serving for each air handler. And sometimes this can be gray. Sometimes it's as easy as saying first floor, second floor, but there's a lot of ranch style homes that have 2 or 3 systems, and you've got to determine where the return and supplies are in order to assign those to different air handlers. So once you actually know the separation, then I can actually test each system and it either passes or fails based upon the square footage that it's serving. So the blower door, the duct blower is actually a common phrase for code compliance. So we're going to do a post-construction test, and we'll say our duct leakage is 107. That comes directly from the gauge, and again, the square footage that system is serving is 2,400 square feet, and that's the math on how to do that. So 107 comes from the gauge, and we calculate the math. So it looks a little awkward. You should always end up with a 0 point something result, and we can round that down to something that's more manageable. So my results are going to be 4.5%, and this can actually be done directly in the gauge, which again is also a nice feature that when I'm running my test, I can determine if I've passed or failed right there live in the test, during the test. You have lots of different options, and this is where some people kind of get lost, is that there are different units that are in the gauge. So I can tap on channel B where you can see the CFM per 100 square feet and the dashes, or the 184, just tap there. And on the left are the various results that I can request. All of these are calculated results, which means you must make sure you enter a volume. And you can see on the screen in the middle, it shows what a square footage, an area. The area is 100,000 square feet. And even while I'm doing my test at the bottom, it tells me how big the area is for my results. One of the common mistakes is you may go from one house to another, and you got to make sure you enter the new, it should say area, there on the bottom. Because area is for the duct tester, volume is for blower door. I'm sure I copied the text from one to the other. This is a gray area, but it is in the code, but you need to ask your building official what is the building thermal envelope consist of? Everybody has a different definition, and this does not come out of the code directly, but is usually interpreted by a jurisdiction or by state. So if all of the ducts and the air handler are located within the thermal envelope, not necessarily conditioned space, but thermal envelope, then you do not have to do that test. Whether or not if your attic is your insulation thermal envelope area on the roof line, whether that counts or not is something that changes by jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So again, something that is out there, but you want to make sure you understand the details. So one of the things that also has appealed to me, that I'm a very visual person, as you can tell by the slides that I create, that there is a quick guide that always comes with the Retrotec systems that has always been visually based. It steps you through with little check boxes on what to do step by step. So if you get a Retrotec system, or if you have one, or if you haven't used it in a while and you're not sure what to do, just pull out the quick guide. It's nice, thick cardboard, paper, and you can actually just go through all the different steps that remind you what to do and how to set up the test and run it. And this is a simple pictorial information about their quick guides. Pick it up and go. I thought I would make sure I reminded you about for the DM32 smart gauge, these are the connections on how we do that. So the input and reference for channel A is pretty much the same as you might do on any system. But the channel B, which is what we connect to the gauge, or to the fan to the gauge, that's a little different. So the Retrotec system always uses the reference to connect its units. For the duct tester, it uses both the reference and the input, because it allows you to spin the gauge or spin the fan around if you're going to do a depressurization or pressurization test. There's nothing to change. You just literally disconnect the flex duct, turn it around, and run another test. It knows whether you're pressurizing or depressurizing, and there's nothing to change. No extra tubing to add, no flow straightener, anything to do. It's very simple to do a pressurization or depressurization test. All right, I'm going to go. I have a few slides on rough-in. So one of the things I do want to outline, we have add this, and it's up on the Retrotec site. So if you're looking for information about the battery, I just threw it in the chat window, and you can click on that. Retrotec does not sell the battery because batteries are a challenge, as you might know if you have a Samsung device. So they give you a reference on what battery will work with the duct tester, and they sell you the cord that goes from this particular battery to the duct tester. But I was able to go out and do this rough-in test, not using the power, but actually using this battery pack. Anyway, so that's one of the options that's out there for Retrotec. If you live in Arizona or other places, I know for a fact that you do not get power till late in the game, and a generator can be very challenging. That battery probably weighs around 12 to 18 pounds, a lot less than a generator. So here's some of the options, though, about sealing your ducts, because you can use the traditional duct mask, the sticky tape, but you can also go and get some foam and just push it inside the duct opening. So it makes it a lot easier to reuse these and go around. So I actually went to Goodwill and got some old cushions and cut them up and use them as a method. They are kind of bulky to carry around, but if you do a lot of rough-in testing, this is a great method to do the duct. So clearly there's different sizes. So I cut a variety of groups based upon the house that I would be doing, and throw them in a big bag and take them to the next job. So I made this slide. This is a new slide for us. So we have say a basement, first floor, second floor system. And if you actually have ducts that are going to be inside finished areas, I highly encourage you to do a rough-in test. Even if you're in a jurisdiction that says you're not allowed to do your own compliance testing due to third-party issues, you should still do a test. Because the last thing you want to do is find out that the ducts that you ran across the ceiling or went up inside the wall have got massive leaks. And some of those massive leaks could have come from someone else later on the job site. But your goal is to find out that when you left the job site, you finished this job, you knew that you had actually passed your requirements. So I highly encourage you to do a rough-in test. And you can actually do a rough-in test and pass that and actually document that you've already passed the code. It is a great thing to do before occupancy, but in general, one of the things you can document with your builders is that, hey, I've already passed this test. I'm good to go. Okay, so post-construction, the most common test out there. So is anybody out there doing rough-in tests? If you are, just give me a shout out. Yes, we do them all the time. With or without an air handler would be great information. So to do your blower door test for our, clearly the roughing, you don't have these kind of components to deal with, and you've already got windows open and that stuff. So for our post-construction, we want to make sure that HVAC systems, exhaust fans, dryers, anything that's creating pressure inside the house is off and not actually influencing our test. So you want to make sure that you have, wherever the ducts are, that they are in theory open to outside. So if you have an air handler in the garage, that garage door should be slightly ajar. In the attic, if it's not vented, then the attic hatch should be open. If it's in the crawl space, either the crawl space should be connected to outside or to the inside in some kind of hatch. And you definitely want to open a window to the inside where you'll be doing your duct test. The reason is that if you're doing the duct test and it's a very small home, your duct tester is going to create pressures inside the house already. So if you're trying to reach 25 pascals, you're actually altering the pressures that are inside the house. The other one is that if you have a very tight attic or other areas that are have a hard time exchanging air, you've actually created a resistance around the leakage that you may have. So if your garage actually has got a good door and a seal, there can actually be a pressure buildup that actually restricts the leakage that are in your ducts. So that's why you always want to make sure the duct tester and the ducts themselves have access to the outside to exchange air. Okay, some basic fundamentals. We're going to seal our supply registers and any other return frills or grills, and insert the blue tube. You can just insert the blue tube if it's a supply register and it's, we try and do the one that's nearest the air handler, and or you can also use a static pressure probe. So we connect and seal the flange. I seal the flange to the return. That's the closest to the air handler, or the largest really, that I want to make sure I'm testing to, and connect the flex. One of the new products that Retrotec has just released, this works on Energy Conservatory or Retrotec. This is an awesome product. This is a clear flange that has clips that will clip to your grill and allow you to connect your flex duct. Makes your setup incredibly easy and quick. So if you're looking for something like this, you can reach out to Jay. They also added a quick collar to make your connections to the Retrotec duct tester a whole lot faster. So your path to making your setup in terms of your time, and especially if it's overhead in the ceiling, just became faster and more stable. Because if you do the overhead grill and the return, it's not uncommon to do the test, and before you're done, the thing is actually fallen off the ceiling. So these clips hold it in place, and it's clear so you can see what you're actually clipping. There's some other ones that I want to promote. These are partners with Retrotec. Vent Cap, if you're not familiar with Vent Cap or the duct block systems, there's their information on the site there. I highly encourage you to do so. This reduces your time of setting up and taking down for a duct test significantly. And if you're doing duct testing regularly, one of these systems will be worth its weight in gold. So this could be either gauge or either system, but we make all of our connections. We have two tubes. We connect to the gauge and we run the test. All right. So it's basically as simple as hitting set pressure and getting our results. Again, it's as simple as actually just turning the fan around to do pressurization or depressurization. A lot of people out there only pressurize. I understand that, and I clearly am not surprised. And but I would convince you that if you're really going to pressurize, in fact, California only allows you to pressurize. We're trying to work on that. But here's why you may want to consider doing both, especially with the Retrotec. It's so fast and simple to do them. If I pressurize the system and I have some leakage, and especially I'm trying to get down to 4 CFM, so every bit of leakage counts, that you actually can have a tiny bit of leakage around your duct mask. And it's very subtle and hard to see. But you can see that I do have leakages showing up around here, around the bottom. And if you added this up to 20 or 30 grills, this can actually be a significant leakage. So, but if I depressurize, all of this gets pulled and sucked tight into against the drywall itself. So you may actually find there's a little bit of a difference between pressurization, depressurization. When air moves through openings, it doesn't always react the same way. You don't always get the exact same numbers. The other example is some people have a lot of flex duct up in the attics, and sometimes those can have slits or holes in them that if you pressurize may actually just give you leakage. If I depressurize, that leakage could actually collapse because the flex duct slightly collapsed. So the point is that if you do both of these, you know that your results have been consistent and you know what your numbers are. If you did them and find out that you're a difference of 70 CFM, clearly there's a problem somewhere. Something you're either pressurizing or depressurizing is actually allowing things to move or close and open up. So it's a great way to confirm your results, especially again if you're doing some kind of rough end test, because you don't want to open up drywall again. For those of you that are doing the depressurization, this is common for both systems, is that the rings are actually inside the flex duct. You can no longer see the rings, so you keep track of what you have inside the flex duct. So usually I can say you can't reach 50 or it can't, sorry, can't reach 25 as your test pressure. And you'll know that because the fan is very, very loud. So if you use your ears, you can also determine how well your test is going. So the first thing to do, all right, so you must reach test pressure. If I can't reach test pressure, I must change something on the fan and then change it on the gauge. So if I can't reach test pressure, then I need to let more air into the duct tester. Right, it's too restricted, it's too loud, and I'm not able to allow enough air to move through it to get to 25 pascals. So I take off the range that's there and I go to open. So I was at 74, I switched to open. Always make sure you change the gauge. It's the number one error that most people make, is they'll change a range on your duct tester and forget to change it on your gauge. So if you opened it up and you still cannot reach 25, and this is a new system, you've got a problem, because it is very easy to reach 25 pascals on a new duct system, especially ones that require mastic or anything like that. So if you can't reach 25, you already have a failure. So there's definitely a problem that's going to happen here. And the best thing to do would be to just kind of leave it on and go around and find the air that's moving throughout the system. But you can document it with the at feature. That'll, even if you only reach 19 pascals, the at feature, which is on both gauges, will also give you your results as though you reached 25. So if you're doing a test and you say, oh, I only got to 19, but these are my results, somebody can come back later and you can compare apples to apples, because you were both giving results at 25 pascals. Okay, so the other one is that I reach my test pressure. I'm good here, but I have no results. So the DG700 says low. The Retrotec DM32 just got 2 dashes, which means I have no results. So at this point, I need to reduce the air or the pressure that's in the gauge in order to get the correct flow, in order to get the correct pressure, in order to get a result. So the duct testers and the blower door, they don't actually calculate or tell you CFM in terms of some fan moving, and that actually calculates CFM. They actually calculate CFM by the pressure that's inside of the unit, inside the fan, and that pressure is extrapolated to CFM. So that's actually how they work. So if I don't have a pressure that's reading inside of the fan too high or too low, I cannot give the results on the gauge. So here I clearly went from 74 down to 47, changed it on the gauge, and now I can get my results. All right, so we're going to run through the whole concept. You want to remove the filter. That's the first step we do. We open a window. Can be any kind of window. Make sure it's cracked. You could open a door. Make sure that my ducts that are in the attic, if it's a vented attic, I'm fine. I seal everything off. We're going to install our flange, get everything sealed, connect the flex duct, and you may actually end up connecting your flex directly to the air handler. That's also a possibility. So now I actually have my duct tester installed. This is a depressurization test. I connect all of my tubing connections to the fan and to the ducts. Everything is sealed, and now I'm able to perform my test and get my results. So in this situation, we have results that are 140 CFM, and I can calculate that out based upon my house of 2,400 square feet. So I'm at 5.6 CFM per 100 square feet, and I've got a problem because I should be below 4. So we definitely can go around and find our challenges and retest again. There's a variety of smoke options that are out there if anybody's interested in the smoke systems that Retrotec has. I did not include those today, but I know Jay has been doing a lot of behind-the-scenes testing with those. So if you're looking for the Retrotec smoke generator, we can send that out to you, and we have a video that'll be online soon. Okay, so for pressurization, it's as simple as everything gets turned around. We're now pressurizing. We're moving air into the duct system. Everything is set up the exact same way. And notice that our results may be slightly different, but we still have to do a better job in terms of passing for our code. And again, I'll remind you that if anything's inside the thermal boundary, that you do not have to perform your duct test. Here's a reminder about zonal dampers. These are actually an issue for some systems that you don't even realize that they're on or they're there. You want to make sure when you go to perform your test, this is why third party can be a challenge, is that you don't even know they're there. That means the HVAC guy's got to come back and make sure they're open. So one of the ways to actually just test the system is by putting air into the duct system, either pressurizing or depressurizing, and just going around to each register and finding out if I actually have results. So if I have no pressure in the systems, and I know that those dampers are closed. Sometimes the dampers may control sections of ducts. They may be individual registers that are there. So if I go around and test each one of them, I can actually determine whether or not they're opened or closed, and then to know that I can perform my tests. And if these are closed, you'll find out that your results can vary and be very erratic. I'm going to go through leakage outdoors briefly because some people ask about it. It's only for 2009, but it is a compliance path for third party or above code type systems. So you do need a duct tester and a blower door at the same time. And here's an illustration that kind of describes what it is. So if I had some leaky pipes and they keep leaking, but I decide on the pipes in the lower section that I'm going to put them in a tank, but they keep leaking, that once the tank is filled with water, the tank can no longer have any more leakage. So the tanks that are in the bottom no longer leak, even though the ducts or the pipe that's outside of my envelope will continue to leak. So if I can create a neutral pressure from what the water that's leaking or the air that's leaking into the envelope around here, that's how the leakage outdoor test works. The one thing you must remember is both fans must be moving the same direction. So if I'm pressurizing the ducts, I must be pressurizing the house. All right. So if you're depressurizing, then you do the same. So here I pressurize, then I create a neutral pressure in the house, and the leakage that's inside the house area will disappear. Same goes if I'm going to do depressurization. It works the same way. I know it seems crazy to think about it, but the pressure is actually neutralized. So I'm depressurizing my blower door as I normally do. If you depressurize your ducts, you don't have to change anything. You can just redo the two tests together, and you neutralize the area in the house in terms of duct leakage, and you have your results. Remember that you can use your speed control that's on there. You can also use cruise control. You can do set pressure to 0. You cannot use the add feature that's available on the gauge. You're literally going to just go to 0. Things that are considered to be 0.5 or less are considered to be 0, but you must enter 0 on the gauge. If you just do set pressure and then set enter, you have to enter the number 0 to get that to happen. Virtual Gauge can do this automatically. It's an app you can download from retrotec.com. And I can do this from the kitchen and control both fans automatically, Wi-Fi or with USB or even Ethernet as a concept. So this can actually be a great feature if you have a huge house or you're trying to stretch between two, but you do need 2 gauges to do this. All right. Jay, you got any questions we want to address? I don't know if you actually have a microphone, but do you have any questions you want to address quickly?
Yeah, it looks like we're in good shape.
Excellent, thanks. Okay, let's kick into some blower door. I have blower door subtraction here because some states do this. If you are one of those states, like Georgia, let me know that you do it. I do know that Kentucky also does this. Again, this is duct testing using your blower door. All right. So basically, what it says is you do your blower door test like you normally do. All the ducts are open. You do your test again. You seal all the ducts, and in theory, the difference between unsealed and sealed would be your duct leakage. And this is actually leakage outside is actually your result here. It doesn't always work out that way. Some people that do it find that, oh yeah, I love it. Other people are like, my results are never the same. So if you are going to use this, there are some multipliers that you must follow. You can download these online. I don't know if the Retrotec will probably have this updated in their next manual, but if you're going to use the blower door subtraction method, you definitely want to use this a multiplier that's in there. It makes your numbers become more stable and more accurate. Okay, we're into blower doors. So mostly 2012, 2015. A lot of jurisdictions skipped 2012 and they went directly to 2015, which can be a shocker for those who are not familiar with blower door testing and some of the compliance facets that are there. So we take our average home, we cut a bunch of holes in it, and outside, inside, the whole thing kind of gets chopped up. I describe it as a bunch of Swiss cheese. It is not just between the indoors and outdoors, but it's also between floors, between crawl spaces and attics. There's a whole lot of areas that all get chopped up that kind of make our houses very leaky and very challenging to keep the conditioned air that we want to have inside controlled, as well as the air we're breathing in terms of controlled. This is actually from the 2009, but it's very similar. They all have this air barrier insulation inspection method. If you learned one thing from this webinar and you're new to blower door testing, follow this list. If you actually were very active about following this list and made sure that these were done and confirmed they were done, or had the builder check them off, or at least the builder felt responsible for these areas, you have a high degree of passing your blower door test. It is when builders who kind of don't pay attention to these areas, and these lists has been updated on 2012 and 15, but in general, these are the areas that are the most troubled areas that should be sealed, and they have guidance as about how they can be sealed. This same type of chart, South Face put together some awesome visuals to go along with it, right? And their original one coincided with the 2009 code in terms of the numbers. The numbers may have altered, but the point is that these areas and these illustrations are huge to give to your builder to make sure that these places are getting taken care of. Behind the tub, around the tub, it's not just a great thing to have insulation in there, but you need to have an air barrier. So you can see the 6-pack hole below the tub. It's a 6-pack. It should be called a 12-pack there because you can put a lot through there. So all of these become resources that your code official. So these are not just making sure that your drywall, your insulation in your knee walls has on all 6 sides, but it also creates a much better air barrier that you're looking for. So these can be downloaded. I'm going to throw some stuff in your chat window again. So this is for the illustrations. And also they made a book on how to do this stuff. So those are the resources that you can actually download yourself. These illustrations were made with federal funds, which means that they are available for anybody to use, reprint, and distribute as needed. I think it'd be great if you always gave South Face credit for creating these, but in general, you can use them in your trainings. You can use them as you need to make sure that you're passing your codes. I think that's the underlying thing that why they developed these is to make sure that everybody had a much better chance of creating better buildings. Okay, so if we only lived in houses that had no windows or doors, I guess it'd be hard to get in or get out, but they would be pretty airtight. So you can see my thermal boundary in pink. I have an air barrier in blue. And then we start cutting things apart, making holes, making all kinds of issues around here. So I now have connections from my crawl space or outside to the attic. But one of the things that people forget about is that anything that penetrates the drywall, which is the number one air barrier that we have in our buildings, that actually, anywhere those penetrations comes, and they actually become part of the air barrier. So that your duct system or your can lights or your junction box or the receptacles and switches, all those are actually the air barrier themselves. I do know that many people are using electrical boxes and other different things and making them airtight. Those are much more requirements that are out there. But in general, you can actually see that there's a lot of stuff that we test for the blower door that actually come into case maybe with you think the duct system. But my leakage outside is directly connected to those kind of penetrations. This also comes from Building Science Corporation. This is a southern climate, so this is the 1 week of how much would go through a normal piece of drywall, how much would go through a piece of drywall that's identical with just a 1 square inch hole. And they both have beautiful weather here. We have 75 degree Fahrenheit with relative humidity at 50. But here's what's shocking is that in 1 week, I got 1.5 pints of water that diffused literally through your drywall. And here I have 14 pints of water in 1 week. So even if you passed your blower door test with the 2012 or 2015, most homes still have a 2 square foot opening. That's a lot of moisture that moves through that. Other illustrations may show about 30 pints of water due to a heating season or cooling season. So there's a lot of moisture that moves through these penetrations, as well as all the other IAQ issues that come along with that. So let's get some more feedback out there for those of you that are sleeping right now. How about how many of you are doing blower door tests? I've been doing them for, let's say, less than a year, more than 2 years. All right. So some are saying not yet, although I think Cohen has actually done one and not letting us know that. So, but I want to try and get a feel for those of you that are kind of new to this, or I've been doing this for so long, it's actually, going on forever. Actually, we have a lot of people that are awake and chiming in. So, um, for those of you that are new or less than a year, or a few that are out there. So, again, we set the blower door up. We're depressurizing from inside to out. We're inside the home, pulling air from the inside to the out. The reason we do it is because it allows us to compare one home to the next. So I set my blower door up, and again, all these penetrations that I've actually put into the house, and air handler, can lights, windows, all these things get added up and become part of my leakage on how the blower door works. If anybody's out there who does more presentations or want to present something to your building code or other people, reach out to Jay, myself in the background, and I can try and give you a few slides that can help your cause. So this is the process. You've seen this illustration many times before, maybe, that basically what we have is we create a pressure difference from inside to out. That's the difference between the red tube or Energy Conservative Choice green tube. So I have a fan that's moving air out, and what I have to happen is that there's 50 pascals in theory are coming in. And this is what allows me to find my leaks in the area, that I can actually use a little pressure pan or a little device to go around and go find areas that actually are measuring high pressures, and I can determine that those are actually the leaks. You can usually just feel them with your hand, is how most people handle this. The air changes per hour is a concept that says when the blower door is running, that's why the 50 is always part of that. So determines that, well, in 1 hour, this is the amount of air that would move through this house based upon these blower door numbers. And it's also based upon the volume of the house. So that's one way to calculate your air changes per hour, is only with the blower door. I threw this slide up because I found it to be kind of beneficial for those who always think everything's inside the energy code, that your duct design, manual D, your manual J, all these kind of things are not in the actual ICC. Many of these are in the mechanical or the IRC. So the R stands for IRC, the M is for the mechanical code. The IRC does usually include these or incorporate these into them as a collective. So here's where it gets pretty shocking. So this is for the 2012, not the 15. So 2012, it was similar results are for 12 and 15, but this is what you had to do in order to pass. Okay, so let's go through the map. So it's still the same for 12 and 15. So it's 5 air changes per hour, climate zones 1 and 2, which is very small. 3 air changes per hour for climate zones 3 through 8. All right. We've already dealt with the approved third party. So let's see what the map looks like for those out there. So climate zones 1 and 2. This may be altered, but this is actually technically what's on the map. So Louisiana or parts of Florida or others may have adjusted these. It's a jurisdiction issue. So Hawaii, there you go, your climate zone 1. But sometimes they'll shift counties around for jurisdiction purposes. All right, for those of you that are in climate zone 3 through 8, which is the majority of folks, these are 3 air changes per hour versus 5 air changes per hour. 3 air changes per hour depends on the volume on and how this is really an easy thing to pass, or can be a nightmare for some builders who build really small homes. You're disadvantaged based upon your the size of the house. All right, so there's our map on, again, there's a lot of local exceptions and adoptions that alter that. So, for instance, Georgia is a climate zone 3 for the whole state. So there are some that are 4, there are some that are 2, but they just went with a statewide policy of 3 air changes per hour. Okay, this also complies with somewhat of the 15 in terms of what I've read, but the 15 requires a different type of procedure in order to do the test. But these are the 6 simple things you must do to do a blower door test. These are closed but not sealed, my exterior windows and doors, which means that you should lock your doors and windows. You can close the damper of the fireplace, but you should not add any additional sealants to these. No grill mask or anything like that. Dampers, interior doors shall be open. I got a few things that expand upon that, but it's an incredibly simple setup. There's a lot of things that are missing from the 2012, and they kind of got burned on that. That's why 2015 became much more challenging. So we have no combustion safety, how to prepare the house. Even though it's a new house, these conditions could be in there. There's no baseline or things about the windy day or technically how to measure the structure, equipment requirements. So many of these things have been handled by 2015. I do know that New York did a good job of accommodating some of these, including how to measure the structure. So the baseline is pretty straightforward for the gauge. You can see that it's right there in the top on channel A. Once you've captured the baseline, which you do under settings, I can always see on the top that I actually have a baseline. And you can go through settings and clear that out. If you turn the gauge on and off, you must either reset the baseline, or that's one way to clear it. So volume counts. So the more volume I have with my house, the easier it is to pass my area. So we can call that conditioned area, or you can call it inside the thermal envelope. There's other ways about how to measure the building. The presentation I'll do on New York next month will include about how to use the ANSI standard on how to measure a house also. So we calculate the volume of the house. We've got 33,000 cubic feet. We perform our blower door test, and we calculate the results. This is the actual calculation. So it's a fan flow, which I got 1900 CFM at 50 pascals times 60, divided by my volume, gives me 3.45 air changes per hour. And depending on where I lived, I either just failed or I'm doing great in the South. And again, these results are live in the gauge while I'm doing my test. So I can actually run around and find things that were leaky, see if there's a way to seal them, come back and do my test and confirm my compliance immediately. So air changes per hour is easily done in the gauge, and you can see that again live by just tapping on channel B. And again, here's where you must change your volume. Last slide should have had area, but you want to make sure that you enter the volume that you're doing for the test, and that's under. I can either enter volume or under settings. There's this little thing to tap under volume and enter that information. For those of you looking for the quick and dirty on how big my opening is when I do my blower door, you can basically take your CFM and divide by 1,000. So for instance, I had a very leaky house of 4,257 CFM divided by 1,000. I got 4.3 square feet. So that's about 2 foot by 2 foot or 25 by 20 inch hole that's in my house. So although preparing your house was documented in the codes themselves, I've tried to add a few here. So the fireplace could have been used. All right, you definitely want to make sure you turn everything off. Somebody may be testing certain things in the house, or has ventilation going in order to dry the house out or do something. So you want to make sure that all of these things are turned off. I highly encourage you to make sure that you evaluate the crawl space and attic in the garage before you do a blower door test. You do not want to find out that this house had flooded in the basement or crawl space and has standing nasty water, that you could actually be bringing those kind of contaminants up into the house. Same with the attic. There could have been some kind of issue or condition that you don't want to contaminate a brand new house. So please look in the crawl space, look in the basement, look through the house. As you're going around basically and tighten everything up, closing all the windows and opening doors, you want to make sure you're paying attention to areas, including the attic. So we want to make sure our fireplaces are closed. We want to close all outside doors and windows, obviously. Here's one that I have altered personally, and that is open all interior doors. It doesn't matter if it has heating or cooling or direct or indirect types of heating in it. I think you're going to find sometimes the huge leakage is from a closet that had a gap above your head that you forgot to see, or especially built-in components like for stereos or audiovisual. Those are some of the worst, because these guys come in after the fact. They put huge holes in the back of the wall going up to the attic, and you really want to make sure that those kind of doors are open because you can feel the air flying through them when they're open and you're doing your test. So again, those are huge things that actually will make your path a whole lot faster. Again, we've turned off all of our things that move air, HVAC systems, exhaust systems, all that kind of stuff. If there is a hot water tank there, no matter where it is, I always just turn it to pilot. I leave my keys there. We want to make sure that the reference tube is not in front of the fan. I know that sounds like a no-brainer for those of you that do it regularly, but not only is it just the end that should be away from the fan, but any of the tubing. If it's in front of the fan, it will vibrate and shake and cause your readings to be unstable. So you want to make sure that your tubing is completely away from the flow of the fan. All right, so conduct a test. We got our guy slowly moving across the screen. All right, he's set up his test. There we go. All right, there you go. I do have a couple of animations to kind of make sure we're on the same page here. So that's outside. We're inside. I set up my frame, and I connect the gauge. Channel A goes to the red tube, goes out through the red cloth. If you're looking for those mantras, for Retrotec, it's red tube always goes through the red cloth, no matter where the gauge is. Right, and yellow always goes to the yellow fan. That's why they're yellow, and that's why the tube is yellow. There you go. So I'm all set, and now I'm actually running a test. You can see the results live with the add feature on. I'm going to skip that due to my time restraints. So I have my son here setting up a test. You can see this on some other webinars that we've had. When is it too tight for who out there requires a manual J? Oh, someone says, do you subtract joist area between floors? You do not. You actually are measuring from outside to outside. There are requirements about where is a room in terms of its ceiling height, whether it's counted. So I'll go through all of that in the webinar we'll have in November. And maybe we'll just do something like that directly.
A couple more there, Joe. There's one for a blower door test in 2015 code. Is the dryer vent left open or tape closed?
Great question. You're not allowed to cover anything that's artificial. So if you are doing a blower door test and the dryer is not there, maybe it's actually the exhaust fan is not there, that these all have dampers besides the ones that are built into the device that you're checking to make sure that they're working. All right. So if the exhaust fan is not there, that could be kind of a challenge because sometimes their dampers don't open and close so easily, or they're already open all the time. But if the dryer is not located, you're not allowed to cover the dryer opening. You're actually determining if the damper on the outside is being pulled tight when you do the blower door test. That's why we're depressurizing. All the dampers should be pulled tight and determine what my test is. All right, a few more slides to go through.
So there's one other question.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Going back to the subtraction test.
Yeah.
The question is the blower door subtraction test specifically excluded in the 2015 IECC?
So it is not in any of the codes. It is not in the 2009, 12, or 15 as a compliance path. All right. So it has been adopted by local jurisdictions. So I do know that, like I said, Alabama, Georgia, Kentucky, some of those have all adopted it as a compliance path. So if you're wondering if it is a path, check with your local jurisdiction. I'll be honest, it's not a method I recommend. It can give you strange readings and inconsistent readings. So just be careful with that path if you're going to use that and if it's approved. Okay, so for those of you that are doing manual J, here's some results that I did a backwards test from. So if you want to find out what your manual J should be reading because of your test, okay, then your manual J for tight gives you these approximate readings. And I did this with a base house and I moved it around the country to try and find out some different numbers. So you may do it and make it slightly different numbers. These are the CFM that came out. And based on a house, I think it was a 2,000 square foot house, these are the numbers that calculated. So if you're in climate zones climate zones 3 through 8, the northern half of the U.S., then you're doing your manual J, and your blower door must pass or must meet this compliance path. You should be selecting semi-tight in your manual J. If you're in climate zones 1 and 2, you're probably going to be using average as your infiltration credit. So you have an infiltration that says how leaky is the house, and they ask you to pick tight, semi-tight, average, semi-loose, loose. So some people just say, well, I always pick loose because it's safest. Well, that'll actually cause the sizing of your unit to be off. So these are some guides to tell you. So if you pick tight, you better have a tight house because you're really approaching close to what a passive house is at 0.6. So again, these are some great guidelines for you that give you a ballpark as to what, because you don't know what it is. You do the manual J, the house is not going to be built for another 3 months maybe, but these are the kind of numbers you're looking for to size your unit. Okay, here's why the 2015 IECC has become a world of its own, or some of the challenges is that you must follow ASTM E779 or E1827. You can find the ASTM 779 online. You can search it. Probably now you're doing that. But you must make sure you're finding 2010 to the 99, 03, and 10 have completely different requirements. So you want to make sure you're following 779-10, which means the 2010 version. Otherwise, again, you'll be doing strange things that won't make any sense for your test. The reality is that it's not possible really for somebody to set up their equipment, pull out their gauge, and do a test to comply with the requirements of ASTM, either one of the tests. This is a kind of a guideline that gives you the difference between 12 and 15, and they really were actually pretty large in terms of what has to happen at this point. These are some locations of where your reference tube should go. This is the illustration that trying to recreate the red squares where your blower door is. They basically don't want it, which is obvious that they don't want you to put your reference tube outside in any kind of corner that could increase the wind conditions or increase your baseline. So a single point, which is the 2012, all right, is the version that's there, and 2015 means I'm going to do multiple readings at multiple different pressures. That's the multi-point concept. So it has to do with elevations above sea level. I have to measure indoor pressures plus or minus 10%. There's a variety of conditions that we usually do for pre and post baseline. Normally we just did one before. So, and I have to have induced pressures between 10 and 60 pascals, which means I'm doing a multi-point test. And again, these are kind of things that you're just going to use software to do to make it simple. So you're going to measure one that may come into play if you're doing a multifamily is the building height. Comes into play in terms of your the building height and the temperature must be less than 1180. So again, all these things are automatically done in the software that Retrotec provides from our cloud and also their fantastic software. So all you're going to do is just say, find my gauge, run the test, and do it. One of the ones that is out there for 779 is that you must do a pressurization and depressurization test. I don't think anybody really knows this or will even probably do it, but it is out there, and now you've been informed that if they ask you, it will confirm if you've done that. So I'm trying to move quick because I know I went past my time. I apologize. Thanks for you that are out there that are hanging on. So the multi-point is actually just going to make sure you have more data, means more accurate results. So a single point test is the kind of test we're really kind of live by and used to doing with the blower door tests now. And there's a whole list of different types of repeated single points or the multi-point tests that we're doing now. So ResNet has a multi-point procedure. The two ASTMs, Army Corps, European standards, NEB and ABBA, these are all mostly large building concepts. Or testing procedures that are out there, and that's where E779, 1827 have really been applied the most, and now they're being brought into our residential. So here's some outlines on both. You're welcome to read them or take screenshots. The reality is, again, it's not possible for an average person to open up their gauge and do this kind of stuff and do the math. It gets really pretty intense. You definitely have to be an engineer to figure that out on how to do this. So you have calculations for air density inside and out, a variety of conditions that have to be accommodated for. Again, all of the software is doing all this stuff for you automatically. And here's some of the math that you would actually have to do. So if this is the kind of math that you can do, you're no problem. I'm sure you can figure it out or create an Excel spreadsheet and do this. But for me, it was a little more than what I wanted to take on. So again, the future of code compliance goes back to what I predicted earlier. RCloud, it'll do these type of tests automatically. You can select the type of standard you want to follow. So we're going to follow the IECC. And on the next page, it asks if you're going to do a single point or a multi-point. And you can actually then do the test automatic. So there's also free software from Retrotec that's fantastic. You can get a free version or you can get a paid version. And it does this type of test, again, automatically. And it gives you a variety of displays and gives you a full-featured report that's much more advanced than the RCloud. The RCloud is just a compliance report. Otherwise, this is just something that the fantastic report is an incredibly detailed report about all the parameters that go into doing a 779 test, and usually designed for kind of a large building to make sure people have a full-featured report that goes along with the test that somebody just spent $40,000 on. So you can get if you download it, you get a free version for 30 days. You can do all kinds of stuff with it. After that, it'll ask you to purchase a license, or you can use a free version, but it'll ask you to pick one standard that you live with. But you can install this on 5 computers if you want to do that. Google Play and Apple stores and Microsoft stores out there. Some of these I thought I got rid of. Okay, there we go. Well, I appreciate all those who are here today. We got a lot of great feedback. It makes me feel really good when I do the webinar and people are chiming in about how long they've been doing it, what kind of gauge, what kind of results are. That kind of stuff helps us a lot in terms of future webinars and what we're doing. For those of you that are in Texas or New York, please reach out to us. I know I see a few of you that are in Texas. We'd like to get your feedback. We probably have your email from registration, but let us know if we can contact you. A lot of things are local jurisdiction, so we want to find out how that's working out for you and what we can do to make your lives more beneficial or improve your process. All right, I'll let you hang out for just a few more seconds. Anybody's got any offhanded questions or anything else that has to do with their gauge or their fan or anything else, kind of a basic tech support. So for those of you that have other things better to do than listen to a few other strange questions, I appreciate your time, and we'll see you either next week or next month. Someone asked about how do I change the volume or the area on the gauge from metric numbers. Excellent question. So for those of you that are out there that have this challenge, I can help you with that. So the DM32 gauge has units that are metric and I call it US standard that are on there. So it can go from either meters and feet, or again, go from feet to inches, or meters. So if you have area and volume that are showing up as metric, then tap on channel B, or results to be displayed under your settings. And if you go down to CFM and it's either per 100 square feet, or you probably have some metric like meters squared per liters cubed, something like that. So that will actually determine your area and volume. So if on your settings, you can see that just below CFM, you have a variety of options. Make sure that reads CFM. You have options of CFM, CFM per 100 square feet, or CFM per 1,000 square feet. Any of those will get you back to imperial results of feet and inches. Someone asked about what's the training that's required for the IDL certification from BPI. There is no written test. It's only a field test, and you just must demonstrate that you can do a blower door test, a duct leakage test, and a leakage to outside test. And there are a variety of areas that go around the country to do that. I think that's one of the things we may do next month, is to do IDL certification webinar on how to pass the test. So let us know if you're interested in that. I do work with a couple of BPI proctors in going around the country to do that. So Louis, let us know where you're at, or Luis, let us know where you're at, and we can let you know if we're going to be in your area anytime soon. Someone asked about the different vents sealing up systems that we had. I'll go back to that real quick. These are the two systems that I've seen work well. The difference between vent cap systems on the left is that Corey Breed's system uses one pole to connect each of his pans or the duct sealing system onto the register with a hook and a string, and then you pull it up with a pole and leave it there and take your pole to connect the next system. The duct block actually uses poles for each individual duct sealing method you can have on there. So if you've got 25 registers, you can use that, then you need 25 poles in order to hold them in place. So I've used a variety of people that use these. They actually use one for certain types of systems, and they use the other for certain other types of systems. So, but there's your link to find those.
So there was a little confusion when you were going with the multi-point testing as to whether that is required or not.
So the feedback, it is required for the multi-point type of test is required for 2015 code. The word on the street is that most people don't know that it's a requirement and are not actually making people do it. So I'm trying to get feedback for that. So I did talk to a bunch of people when I was out at a couple of conferences who caught my session that was on the ASTM requirements for 2015, and they were like, I don't think anybody knows about this or is doing it, Joe. So, but if you do need to, or your code official realizes you're supposed to, there are methods to do that. I think a lot of people are complying with 2015 by just doing a single point test. So I think any testing is better than no testing. So I'm sure that the code officials are following that. So I think there's a variety of methods to actually get you through. All right, well, I want to thank you.
There was where you could get a book. You had about a book on there called the Building Science Corp. Where do you get that?
Oh, you can go to buildingsciencecorporation.com, and there you can buy their books, and their books are regional. They actually have books that are hot, dry climate, hot, humid climate, cold climates, hot, mixed climates. There's a variety of different books for each region. Those are kind of considered the Bible of building. Or you can also just search their site and find many of the stuff you might be looking for as individual articles or individual illustrations.
The only other one I see is for the IDL certification. Where do you find the dates for the different areas?
Those are all independently provided. So their BPI doesn't do training. So you have to find a trainer that does that. But if you send me your contact information, I can reach out to you and let you know where I'll be with a few other trainers over the next couple of weeks or couple of months. And you can also just search IDL training that's out there. So let us know what we can do to help you. Anything else?
I think that covers it.
Well, for those of you that did stay along to hear some strange questions and answers, I appreciate your time. That's a wrap, everybody. Thanks so much. Jay Evans in the background, you rocked. Thanks a lot for helping us out.